podcast. We have a special guest today, a special interview, and I'm so excited to be joined by Steve Feinstein, also known as Foon to most people. I think I'm the only one that calls him Steve. But Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show, and I think it's a fascinating time in junior golf. So super excited to have you.
It's a pleasure. I must say to you that during the couple of years that I've watched your show and all your news flashes, I think it's been a very big help to golf in Rhode Island, all kinds of golf, not just junior golf. You seem more and more to get out to various events and people and so on. So I think there's so little coverage of golf elsewhere that I think what you're doing has been very helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words, and it's been fun to continue to grow, build our brand, and try to do as more than what we did the previous year. So obviously next year will be a big challenge because this year was the U.S. Open and Live Golf and whatever. So, but we'll worry about that when we get there. I guess my first question is, where did the nickname Foon come from, and who was the first one to call you that? Again, I think I'm the only person that calls you Steve.
Well, everybody asks that, and I have a standard answer that I'd have to kill you if I told you. I don't answer the story. It did come from camp, and I'll mention that in a moment, but I don't really tell the story. I think it wouldn't be as exciting as the mystery around it.
All right, fair enough. Well, I'll just keep calling you Steve. That's all right. I think it's so interesting to have you on. It's just an interesting time in Rhode Island golf and junior golf. Just as we tape this podcast on Thursday morning here, we have Vinny Papa about to tee off in the Notre Dame Championship down in Louisiana. We have Davis Chatfield starting the final round of Korn Ferry Tour Q School on Friday. And then obviously we have a various number of players who just turned pro recently, like Will Dixon and Christopher Encore, the former URI star, and obviously Patrick Welch is on his way. But talk about that. Talk about, I mean, obviously you watched a lot of these kids kind of grow up, and we'll kind of get into some of those stories as well. But just talk about the current state of kind of these kids now kind of turning pro, and also in Vinny's case and others, Max Jackson in the U.S. Junior Am, whatever, playing on kind of getting to a national stage where they are now.
Well, I think a lot of people up north don't think that, or maybe the rest of the country don't give a lot of credit to golf in the Northeast. And I think that's a big mistake because we've had good players going on to greater heights for a long time now. I think the difference between here and elsewhere in the country is that perhaps for every really good player up in this area, there might be, 8 or 10 from Florida or Texas or California, but the good ones are good. And you've mentioned a couple. I go back in terms of my involvement with golf. I was just kind of making a note for myself that, we've got a number of players on the various tours that are damn good players. Megan Kang was perhaps the best, women's player ever to come out of Challenge Cup and in this area, and she's been very successful on the PGA Tour. Keegan Bradley played Challenge Cup. He just won recently. Brittany Altamari from Massachusetts, Richie Wierenski from Mass, Peter Uihlein, who's now on the Live Tour, was one of our really good junior golfers. So, and I'm not even including people like Faxon and Andre and Quigley and so on. So there's plenty of good golf up here. And you are right. There are any number of younger guys now making their way. And we're very hopeful that some of them will continue. Chatfield has already made his way onto the Korn Ferry Tour, as has Danny Geis from Connecticut. And they've got their card. Now they're playing the finals for seeding, so to speak. Michael Thorbjornsen at Stanford is a can't miss prospect. He will undoubtedly follow along those lines as well. A little bit older guy from New Hampshire, Nick Pandolina, is on the Korn Ferry Tour. So there's a lot of success, and And I, as you know, or people maybe don't realize, I've been working with the Challenge Cup junior golf organization for a long time. And every one of these players has come through the Challenge Cup. Of course, they play other events and RIGA and MGA and so on, and AJGA. But they all get their start on Challenge Cup. And I've been around golf all over the country. And Challenge Cup, in my opinion, is the best regional tour in the United States. And they've reached out to a lot of other places. So the Challenge Cup has events in New York and Connecticut and Florida and Bethpage and Maine and New Hampshire. So they've given a start to a lot of these kids, and they're very loyal to Challenge Cup. So it's been exciting for me to see all of these kids, I call them kids, I always will, advance and make their way, at a higher level. And it's because of what we do. And let me just mention, you didn't ask, but at some point, my business was running a boys' summer camp in Maine, and I did that for a long time and eventually retired. And when I retired, everybody says, well, how did you get into junior golf? And as near as I can remember, I think all that happened was there was a caddy at Ledgemont, where I belong, who needed a ride to a tournament. And I took him and met Dave Adamonis Sr. This Dave Jr. wasn't even involved in the tour at that point. And I just enjoyed it. I always worked with kids, and one thing led to another. And on the local level, that's really how I started on junior golf. And I'm still going. We have a tournament this weekend, believe it or not. There it is, November. We have a tournament in Agawam Hunt, which is one of our final tournaments of the year. But I branched out. I've done a lot of other things. If you're interested, we can mention those. But that was as simple a way as I started in junior golf as you could possibly get.
When you first started, or like you said, when you drove that caddy to Ledgemont, what was your kind of first impressions of the game? Kind of where was the game at that time in Rhode Island, or just in New England in general? But kind of where was the game? What were your first impressions of the game, kind of at that time?
Well, I always played golf, Joe, but because my job being a summer camp director, I was away all summer. I really wasn't involved in the guts of golf, which is in the summer. When I got back, it was September already. But there already was a lot of interest, a lot of legends from golf I started to hear about, with the Quigleys and the Karstens and all kinds of people. Some of them are still involved in the RIGA. I think golf has gone through a couple of phases, but what I'm seeing now is a tremendous interest in junior golf. And let's face it, that's the future of golf, that these kids grow up to be, club members and so on and so forth. So I think it's strong. I think it's strong throughout the country, to tell you the truth. The pandemic probably exposed more people to golf than originally had expected. And I think that has continued. Clubs, many of them are completely full. You can't get a tee time at public courses. I think it's terrific. And I was also got involved with RIGA and was president of RIGA. And I think they are a terrific state golf organization, and do a tremendous amount for the state and the region. And they too have helped develop a lot of people in golf who would then assume different positions. So my impression of golf in this state, which is really more or less what we're talking about, is that it's very strong.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about, we have a number of kids playing Division I college golf, even lower Division I, but Division I still Division I, like Harry Dessel and Alexis Florio and others. We have all the kids playing Division II and III, who we've been trying to cover, and then obviously we have kids playing at Rick and Roger Williams. It's just been amazing to me, and again, not knowing the deep necessary history, because I just kind of started really diving into this stuff a couple of years ago, but just in these couple of years, just seeing all the kids that now are going to college and playing golf, again, no matter what level they're at, college golf is college golf. I think it's been really impressive. I'm not sure there's ever been anything like this from Rhode Island in recent. I mean, I know we Faxon and Android, but they were kind of outliers ish at the time. It feels like, but now it feels like now all these kids are kind of going. They're playing golf. They're really playing for the most part. I mean, obviously Harry's a freshman and Morgan McLeod's a freshman, but I think that's just been amazing to see now how many kids we have playing in college golf somewhere. I don't know if it's ever happened before.
And I'm very much involved in this. Some years ago, after I really got involved in junior golf, I started a small. It really wasn't a business; it was a hobby of consulting with families about junior golf, and that inevitably led to college recruiting and so on. So, at any one time, I maybe have a half a dozen or a few more kids who are my clients, and the last year or two of that association, the emphasis is on college recruiting. 10 minutes ago, I just got a call from a parent, and one of my clients who was deciding amongst a number of New England schools just made a decision to attend Assumption. He had been going back and forth with a bunch of schools, but every one of these kids who plays junior golf, sure, some of them start off thinking they're going to go to Duke or Stanford or whatever. And the great majority of the area kids end up going to Northeast schools, which I think is good. And you look at the rosters of so many schools that you have mentioned and many, many others, and they're just filled with our New England kids, and they have an opportunity to play golf at whatever division is correct for them. And the superstars, John Broderick from Massachusetts is going to enter Vanderbilt this year, and a Michael Sobionson at Stanford. So there is an opportunity if you really get exceptional and play at the national level, which is what is required to go to those type of schools. Then the coaches find out and recruit you, which I think is terrific. And it's like a goal for all the other kids to continue working at their game.
Is because people come to me and they ask me about, where do you think this kid's going to college? Where do you think this kid's going to play in college? And I say, well, it's hard to say because they got to go and play well on a national stage at a U.S. Junior Am or at a, whatever the big the junior tournaments are. I don't know them all off the top of my head. But is that the hardest part for kids from this area is to go to get into these national tournaments, and then two, go and play well there? Is that the biggest challenge that you see for a lot of these kids?
Yes, because most of the big tournaments in the summer are outside of this area. So first of all, it's travel, which involves expenses for the family. Yeah. It means going out of your comfort zone. But if you're a good player, that's what you have to do. You got to test yourself against what's out there. A lot of these kids are, big fish in a small pond. But once you get out and you realize what the competition is all about, I think it helps you narrow your goals as to where you might fit in going to college. But there's a lot of variables. A quick story. When one of my client kids is going to visit colleges, I always prep them about intelligent things to ask the coach or to respond to a coach's question. One of those is, well, you're going to ask the coach, what do I have to do at this point to be recruited by you? What are you looking for? And this coach at one of the biggest national schools you could imagine, and I know he might have said this a little bit in jest, but there's more truth to it. He looked the kid straight in the eye and said, listen, pal, I look for three things. I look for low scores, I look for low scores, and I look for low scores. Well, it threw the kid a little bit, but there's truth in that. If you want to go to a Duke or a Northwestern or whatever, that's their job, is to recruit the very best players they can. And that holds true whether you're going to go to Babson or Assumption or Bryan or whatever. The coach's job is to get for their team the best players that fit into their program.
Has the recruits? I hear this a lot too from talking to various people about how high school golf in Rhode Island is obviously great, and it's been fascinating, but it's not. Coaches aren't really coming up here to to watch you play in the, no offense, with the high school golf, state championship. And that's why it's so important for these kids to get out there and play in these national events. Is that kind of a negative of just where we live, number one, but two, just kind of the high school golf scene,
Well,
if you will?
I think there's tremendous value in high school golf. I think being on a team,
Mhm.
golf is an individual sport, but being on a team, I think teaches you certain things. Um, uh, National coaches would not pay much attention to high school golf in Rhode Island, but all of the New England schools, they
Yeah.
are constantly seeing these kids' names in papers or in, shows like yours and so on. So of course they pay attention, especially when it comes to state. In Rhode Island, it's just really just the finals. But in a state like Massachusetts, it's two or three different levels to get to the state finals. And the coaches notice these things. So I think it's a plus. In Rhode Island, it seems that there's only one or two at any one time, any one or two really good players, and they tend to dominate. I'm thinking of a Will Dixon, who you must know that name. He
Mhm.
won the high school championship 4 times, or maybe won the Rhode Island Juniors for whatever it was. And Max Jackson has doubled up on both the Interscholastic and the Rhode Island Juniors. So they tend to dominate, but that's good for them. It gives them a little bit more exposure, and I think is impressive to coaches at any level when a kid can rise to that level and win state championships. It's a good thing for their resume.
The guys that have gone to big schools from here, Chatfield going to Notre Dame, or Patrick Welch going to Oklahoma, even Will Dixon went to Georgia Tech. And obviously, two of those three are pros now, and Patrick is going to be a pro in short order. And I wrote this editorial a few weeks ago, just as this Q school stuff started, about how these guys are so important for this current group of Rylanders, similar to how Brad Faxon, Billy Andrade, and Brett Quigley were to that kind of era. But these kids are so important because they can show that there's a path to a big school, number one, but two, there's a path to the pros from Rhode Island. You don't have to completely rearrange your life and move to Florida like was thought years ago. So I wrote that editorial a few weeks ago, whatever. And I'm not saying that means dozens and dozens of kids are going to turn pro. That's not what I'm saying. But just that the importance of them specifically turning pro, making it in the pros, playing at a big school from Rhode Island. I think Will Dixon committed to Georgia Tech in his sophomore year, something like that. But I was interested to pick your brain on that, as far as kind of the importance of them for specifically, but obviously I'm sure there's others too. You can probably make the same argument for players in Massachusetts and whatever other state. But just talk about the importance of them showing that you can get to a big school from Rhode Island, to the pros from Rhode Island. And again, I'm not saying dozens of kids are going to turn pro. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they're showing a path for the few special ones that could be coming in the near future.
All right. I think it's very important that I think they serve as a role model, and if nothing else, it just proves that if you really got what it takes, you may be able to succeed at the highest level. Maybe every junior golfer that starts out pictures themselves playing in the Masters or what have you, but in reality, by the time they graduate high school, even they know that's not going to happen. But for the few that are such an exception, when they see these previous kids being successful at various levels, I'm not going to answer that. I think it helps them understand what it takes to get there or to not get there, which is just as important, because there's so many kids that have followed that route and been unsuccessful, and 4 or 5 years later they're turning back to be amateur and so on. So it's I think Rhode Island it's been fortunate that there have been examples of kids and men who have gone that far.
Yeah, I think it's like I said. I think, like I wrote about, I think they're very important. I think it's important for them to keep pushing forward despite whatever hardships in golf might come along. Which surely there will be some for any of us that have played golf before. A few more things I want to pick your brain on. Over the years, you've been doing this for over 30 years. You've been involved in junior golf in Rhode Island and in New England. who, I mean, we mentioned a few of them obviously, but who are some of the players that you worked with or talked with, and do you have any cool stories that you can share in regards to some of the players that you've worked with over the course of your storied career?
Um, well, yes. I mean, it's rare when you get to work with a superstar kid, and I've known them all. I've advised them all, if not professionally, certainly, at various tournaments and so on. And I think you can spot early on the few kids who really have what it takes to go further. And it takes a lot more than just skill. I mean, there's a financial consideration. The family has to be able to afford it. But kids need a certain drive, a certain stick-to-itiveness, if you will, and you see it without question. I've always, Davis Chatfield, if he ever gets on the PGA Tour, might be the smallest pro ever to be on the PGA Tour, and yet he's maximized what he can do physically and everything else, and he's got a certain drive that had it. Will Dixon was a superstar at 13 and 14, had his ups and downs, which everybody has, and he's certainly made a breakthrough this year. Patrick Welch, right away, we knew he had what it takes, and despite what some people saw as a flaw by him playing cross-handed, he was resolute. He knew that that's what he could do and wanted to do, and he's certainly gonna, we're certainly going to hear a lot more from him. So I don't know if I have any specific stories, but it certainly is interesting to see these few who go on to be at a much higher level. And I know it filters its way down to everybody else. And they all show up. Challenge Cup has tournaments with the pro divisions and college divisions and so on, which I think has been very smart on the part of Dave Adamonis to include them. And it serves as a exposure for all the rest of the kids who are playing.
Yeah, I think obviously it's been great. It's been fascinating to watch, and I've been trying to cover as many Challenge Cup events as I can. Try to go to a bunch of them. Obviously, I can't be at every single one, but I try to at least follow the scoring and try to pay attention to who's doing what, and specifically as it relates to Rhode Islanders, obviously. Speaking of Challenge Cup, obviously you talked a lot about Challenge Cup today, and you've been very involved in it. You're kind of been one of the faces of it. You're kind of one of the faces of junior golf, if you will. But since it started way back when, to now, and how important has Challenge Cup really become in golf, and it has surprised you in any way as far as how big it really has become in the state of junior golf?
Oh, I think it's the primary reason why a lot of the kids from the Northeast develop their games, because the competition, they know as soon as they start to get a little bit better, they realize that they've got to move forward and play against the best players, and that's what Challenge Cup offers. And because, Rhode Island suffers because there are so many good players from Massachusetts and Connecticut that it's hard for a Rhode Island kid to win a Challenge Cup tournament. But that doesn't mean they can't shoot well and play well. So I would say it in the last 20 years for sure. I think Challenge Cup has been the dominant force in junior golf and helping kids get to college and perhaps beyond. Dave Adamonis has really been a genius in terms of developing new types of tournaments and exploring different locations and moving Challenge Cup to other states to host tournaments, so you meet those kids. I sometimes I'll meet a kid at some tournament outside of Rhode Island or Challenge Cup, and he's pretty good. And I say, "Have you heard of Challenge Cup?" He said, "Yeah, I think I've heard of it." Well, you're a pretty good player. If you want to develop, you need to be playing Challenge Cup. And I'm very proud of the fact that I've exposed Challenge Cup to kids who perhaps never would have gotten involved, and sure enough, when they get there, they're playing pretty good and they're making a name for themselves. So yes, I don't think you could ever underestimate the value that Challenge Cup has added to the junior golf scene. It's been enormous.
And has that, and I don't know the answer, but has has it surprised you at all as far as how big? I mean, you were involved with it from the very beginning. Is it surprising to you at all, just as far as how big it really has become? I mean, it's obviously credit
Yes,
to Dave. Has it
it
surprised you how big it's become?
from where it started.
Right.
I am definitely surprised. When Dave's father started, it was one tournament. It was called the High School Championship, and that's all they did. And and Dave certainly was a senior, was an innovator, but Dave Jr. has taken it to new levels. And it's, there's like waiting lists on almost every tournament. So it's they know where they have to play. And in comparing it to other places around the country, there are some other certainly very good tours and events in other parts of the country. But for little old Rhode Island, this has been a boon for junior golf.
Absolutely. All right. Last thing, I want to get you out of here on this. You have such great insight into junior golf and great foresight. You can see kind of things, see how things develop. But over the next, say, couple of years or so, what is something that you're looking forward to watching? You're looking forward to kind of the guys in the pros. Cause I'm probably looking forward to all of it, obviously, but something that really is going to interest you. You're looking forward to the guys continuing to push in the pros. You're looking forward to, maybe Max Jackson completing his run in high school. What is something over the next couple, or anything else? What's something over the next couple of years that Steve Feinstein is really looking forward to keeping an eye on?
I think just to see more kids develop their games, for those that have a little bit more than others to take it to another level, whether that be college or beyond. I could spend an entire day doing nothing but looking at scores during the summer anyway, of tournaments all around the country, not just for Rhode Island kids or New England kids, but I've met so many in so many places. And I gotta, if we're nearing the end, I gotta tell you two quick stories.
Go for it.
For years, when I first started working with Challenge Cup, I also started working with a tour that's now not in operation called the FCWT. It was nationwide. They ran 60, 70 tournaments. And especially in Florida, there wasn't a whole lot going on. And all the pros kids used to play. So one tournament, Arnold Palmer's grandson, Sam Saunders, was playing. So Arnold came up to watch him play. In fact, he called us to ask, imagine this, if it was okay for him to come up and watch his grandson play.
Oh, wow.
So I knew there would be a crowd following him. So I kind of acted as a point person. So at one point we went from one green to the next tee. And at that tee, there happened to be a halfway house and they served drinks. So when Mr. Palmer got there first, and when I got there, he comes over to me. He said, "Steve, can I buy you a Bloody Mary?" This was during the tournament. And I thought for a few seconds. I said, "Mr. Palmer, I might be the only person in the world that has ever refused a drink from Arnold Palmer, but I can't. I'm working this tournament. Maybe afterwards, if you still love me." One other story. John Cook's son was playing our tournament, and this is FCWT. And we used to allow caddies, and John was caddying for his son, Jason. And I could see them reading a putt on the green, and Jason missed. So Jason stormed off to the next tee, and John was a little bit behind. I went up. We had become pretty good friends at that point. I said, "John, what's harder for you, trying to sink a 6-footer on the Pro Tour or caddying for Jason?" He didn't miss a beat. He said, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done."
That's awesome. Well, let me get one more question, if you don't mind, because I actually had it written down. But you've had such a tremendous career in golf. You're so impactful to so many people, kids and adults, both alike. And I always appreciate talking to you either on Facebook or when I see you. You've been super helpful to me in starting this kind of golf news organization. But I guess last question is, when you look at your career, and obviously he's still going strong, but what do you think you want what do you want your legacy to be? What do you think your legacy is in golf and Rhode Island golf and whatever, however you want to quantify it? But what do you think what do you want your legacy to be?
Well,
Golf wise, obviously.
I, and I have to liken golf to my career as a camp director. I think really nothing more than for kids and parents to feel that I was a positive influence on them personally, never mind golf or as a camper, but that I was there for them if something came up. I was available, and that they saw me as someone that they could trust and feel that I could be of help to them in whatever their endeavor was. In this case, golf. That I certainly wouldn't want any more than that. And if that's what it was, then I would feel that what I've done has been a great success.
Awesome. Steve Feinstein, also known as Foon, but I'll call you Steve. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It was an awesome conversation. And hopefully I'll see you down the road, either next year for sure, but maybe sooner than that. So thanks so much for your time, and thank you for all you do for Rhode Island golf, for junior golf, and for being willing to help me out with questions or concerns that I have whenever
And
I message you.
Joe, thanks for making Golf News Rhode Island a success and to further golf in this area.